Behind the gates of Windsor Castle, where ancient stones hold centuries of secrets and royal traditions run deeper than the Thames itself, something extraordinary was about to unfold. The world thought they knew Prince William and Catherine, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. They had watched their fairy tale wedding, celebrated their children's births, and followed their public appearances with devoted fascination. But what happened on that snowy December morning would reveal a side of their relationship that even the most dedicated royal watchers had never witnessed. In a world where every royal gesture is calculated, every public appearance choreographed, and every gift exchange scrutinized by protocol experts, William was about to break every rule in the most beautiful way possible. This wasn't just another royal Christmas story. This was the moment when a prince chose love over protocol, when a future king decided that his wife's happiness mattered more than 1,000 years of tradition. As Catherine walked through the frost-covered gardens that morning, completely unaware of what awaited her, millions of royal fans around the world were about to witness something that would restore their faith in true love, royal or otherwise. What William had planned would not only surprise his beloved wife but would also remind the world why their love story had captured hearts across the globe. The gift wasn't wrapped in expensive paper or adorned with precious jewels. It couldn't be bought in any store or commissioned from the finest artisans. What William was about to give Catherine was something far more valuable, something that would make even the most cynical observers believe in the magic of Christmas and the power of genuine love. This is the story of how one unexpected gesture melted the hearts of royal fans worldwide and proved that even in the most scrutinized family on earth, authentic moments of love still have the power to surprise, delight, and inspire. The first snowfall of December had transformed Windsor Castle into something from a Christmas card. Catherine stood at her bedroom window, watching the delicate flakes dance past the ancient stone walls, each one catching the early morning light like tiny diamonds. She had always loved this time of year, but being a member of the royal family had changed everything about Christmas. Gone were the spontaneous moments, the surprise gifts, the cozy family traditions she had grown up with. Everything now followed centuries-old protocols, from the order of gift-giving to the precise timing of Christmas dinner. She wrapped her silk robe tighter around herself and smiled at the sight of their 3 children playing in the snow below. George was attempting to build a snowman with the intense concentration he brought to everything, while Charlotte directed the operation with the authority of someone far older than her years. Little Louis simply threw handfuls of snow into the air, laughing as it fell back down on his head. The sight warmed her heart, reminding her that despite all the formality surrounding their lives, her children were still allowed to be children. "They're up early," William said softly, appearing behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against his chest, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. Charlotte woke up convinced it was Christmas morning, Catherine replied with a gentle laugh. When she realized it was still 3 weeks away, she decided snow was the next best thing. William chuckled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I remember being that excited about Christmas when I was their age. Though I suspect our Christmas mornings were quite different from what Charlotte and the boys experience." Catherine turned in his arms, studying his face. There was something different about his expression this morning, a hint of excitement that reminded her of George when he had a secret he was dying to share. "You look like you're planning something," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Who, me?" William asked with exaggerated innocence. "I'm a respectable member of the royal family. We don't plan things. We follow schedules that were written by committees and approved by Parliament." "William," Catherine said, laughing despite herself. Even after all these years of marriage, he could still make her smile when she least expected it. "I know that look. You're definitely planning something." He kissed her forehead gently. "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. You'll just have to wait and see." Before she could respond, he had slipped away, leaving her standing at the window with more questions than answers. The morning proceeded with its usual royal efficiency. Breakfast was served at precisely 8 o'clock in the morning room, where Catherine found herself seated across from William at a table that could have accommodated 20 people. The children chatted excitedly about their snow adventures while a team of staff moved silently around them, ensuring every need was anticipated before it was even expressed. Catherine had grown accustomed to this level of service, but there were still moments when she longed for the simplicity of her childhood home, where her mother would serve breakfast on mismatched plates and conversations flowed without the careful attention of staff members recording every word for the historical record. "Mummy, can we build a bigger snowman after breakfast?" Charlotte asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "One as tall as Daddy?" "We'll see, darling," Catherine replied automatically, the response of a mother who had learned that promising specific activities could lead to logistical nightmares when those activities had to be coordinated with security details and photographed for official records. William caught her eye across the table, and she saw understanding there. He knew how difficult it was for her sometimes, this balance between being a mother and being a duchess. He had grown up in this world, had never known anything different, but Catherine remembered what it was like to make spontaneous decisions, to change plans without consulting 3 different departments. After breakfast, Catherine retired to her study to review the day's schedule. Her private secretary, James, had arranged it with military precision: a video call with patrons of her charitable foundation at 10, a review of Christmas card designs at 11, lunch with the local Women's Institute at 1, and an afternoon reviewing proposals for next year's royal engagements. It was a full day, but not an unusual one. She was halfway through her first cup of tea when William appeared in the doorway, dressed not in his usual morning suit but in casual clothes that looked suspiciously like the ones he wore when he wanted to disappear from royal duties for a few hours. "Cancel your morning appointments," he said without preamble. Catherine looked up from her papers, startled. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me. Cancel everything until lunch. James can reschedule the video call, and the Christmas card designs can wait another day." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "We're going out." "William, we can't just cancel appointments. The foundation call includes patrons from 3 different time zones, and the Christmas card approval is already weeks behind schedule. The press office has been very clear about the importance of maintaining our commitments, especially during the holiday season when public attention is at its highest." William crossed the room and gently took the papers from her hands, setting them aside on her desk. "The foundation will understand. The Christmas cards will get approved. The world will not end if the Duchess of Cambridge takes one morning off from her official duties." Catherine stared at him, searching his face for some clue about what had prompted this sudden deviation from their carefully managed routine. "Where exactly are we going that's so important it requires canceling half my morning?" "That," William said, offering her his hand, "is a surprise. Trust me." The question hung in the air between them, weighted with years of marriage, of shared responsibilities, of a life lived under constant scrutiny. Catherine looked at his outstretched hand, then at the pile of papers on her desk, then back at his face. She saw something there that she hadn't seen in months: pure, uncomplicated joy. "James is going to have an absolute fit," she said, but she was already reaching for his hand. "James will survive. The question is, will you come with me on an adventure?" Catherine stood up, her decision made. "Give me 5 minutes to change clothes." 20 minutes later, they were walking hand in hand through the private gardens of Windsor Castle, having left a trail of confused staff members in their wake. Catherine had changed into warm jeans, boots, and a wool coat, clothes that felt wonderfully ordinary after a morning of royal protocols. William had insisted she bring gloves and a warm hat, but when she asked why, he had simply smiled and told her she would see. The gardens in winter were beautiful in a different way than in spring or summer. The carefully manicured beds were dormant, the trees bare except for a light coating of snow, but there was something peaceful about the sleeping landscape. They walked in comfortable silence for several minutes, their breath creating small clouds in the crisp air. "I've been thinking," William said eventually, his voice serious despite the lightness of the morning. "About what you said last week, about feeling like we're always performing." Catherine glanced at him, remembering the conversation he was referencing. They had been getting ready for bed after a particularly long day of official engagements, and she had confessed to feeling like she was constantly playing a role rather than being herself. It was a sentiment she rarely voiced, knowing that it could be misunderstood or taken out of context if overheard by the wrong person. "I didn't mean to sound ungrateful," she said quickly. "I know how fortunate we are, and I truly love the work we do. It's just that sometimes I miss being able to be spontaneous, to make decisions without consulting committees and considering the implications for the monarchy." William stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You don't need to explain or apologize. I understand completely. I grew up in this world, but even I sometimes feel suffocated by the protocols and expectations. I can't imagine how much more difficult it must be for you, having to adapt to all of this as an adult." They stood there in the garden, surrounded by centuries of royal history, two people trying to maintain their humanity in a world that often seemed to value tradition over personal happiness. Catherine looked at her husband's face, seeing not the future king but the man she had fallen in love with at university, the one who had once surprised her with midnight picnics and impromptu trips to the coast. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. "I'm thinking," William said, "that maybe it's time we reminded ourselves that underneath all the titles and responsibilities, we're still just William and Catherine. We're still the same people who fell in love despite all the complications that come with my family. And I think we need to protect that part of ourselves, especially during Christmas." "And how exactly do you propose we do that?" William grinned, the expression transforming his face from serious to mischievous. "By breaking a few rules. Starting today." Before Catherine could ask what he meant, she heard a sound that made her turn around in surprise. Coming up the path behind them was a horse-drawn sleigh, complete with bells jingling softly and a driver who touched his cap respectfully as he approached. The sleigh was beautifully crafted, painted deep green with gold trim, and the horse was a magnificent chestnut mare with ribbons braided into her mane. Catherine turned back to William, her mouth open in amazement. "You arranged this?" "I did. No photographers, no press coverage, no official record. Just us, taking a sleigh ride through the countryside like any normal couple might do on a snowy December morning." He gestured toward the sleigh. "Your chariot awaits, my lady." For a moment, Catherine was speechless. The gesture was so unexpected, so thoughtfully romantic, that she felt tears prick her eyes. In a world where every activity had to be planned weeks in advance and approved by multiple departments, William had somehow managed to arrange something completely spontaneous and private. "How did you manage this without anyone knowing?" she asked as they approached the sleigh. "I have my ways," William replied mysteriously. "Let's just say that being the future king occasionally has its advantages, especially when you have staff members who remember what it was like to be young and in love." The driver helped them into the sleigh, settling warm blankets around their legs and offering them a thermos of hot chocolate that steamed invitingly in the cold air. As they settled into the comfortable seats, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months: complete relaxation. For the first time in ages, she wasn't thinking about appointments or protocols or public appearances. She was simply sitting in a sleigh with her husband, about to enjoy an adventure that was theirs alone. The sleigh began to move, the horse stepping carefully through the snow-covered paths. The bells on the harness chimed softly with each step, creating a musical accompaniment to their journey. Catherine looked around in wonder, seeing familiar grounds from an entirely new perspective. Everything looked magical from the sleigh, like something from a fairy tale. "This is incredible," she said, snuggling closer to William under the warm blankets. "I can't believe you arranged all of this without me knowing." "The planning took weeks," William admitted, wrapping his arm around her. "I had to coordinate with the groundskeepers to ensure the paths would be safe, arrange for the sleigh to be brought in from a private collection, and somehow keep it all secret from both you and the press. I'm fairly certain I've used up all my favors with the private secretary's office for the next year." Catherine laughed, the sound carried away on the winter air. "It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. But this can't be the only surprise, can it? You look far too pleased with yourself for this to be everything." William's smile widened. "What makes you think there's more?" "Because I know you, William Arthur Philip Lewis. You're not just breaking one rule today. You're breaking several, aren't you?" "You'll have to wait and see," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But I will say this: today is about us. Not the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, not the future King and Queen, just us. Today, we're going to remember what it feels like to be spontaneous." As the sleigh continued through the winter wonderland, Catherine felt something inside her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time: pure, uncomplicated happiness. She didn't know what other surprises William had planned, but she was beginning to understand that this day was about more than just a sleigh ride or breaking protocol. It was about reclaiming the part of their relationship that existed outside of their public roles. The sleigh rounded a bend in the path, and Catherine gasped at the sight that greeted them. Ahead was a scene that looked like it had been lifted directly from a Victorian Christmas card, a frozen pond surrounded by snow-laden trees, with a small wooden pavilion at the water's edge. Steam rose from the pavilion, suggesting warmth and comfort inside, and fairy lights twinkled in the bare branches of the surrounding trees. "William," she breathed, "this is like something from a dream." "The day's just beginning," he replied, his voice warm with satisfaction at her reaction. "Are you ready for the next surprise?" The sleigh came to a gentle stop beside the frozen pond, and Catherine could see that the pavilion had been transformed into something magical. Warm golden light spilled from its windows, and she could make out comfortable furniture inside, along with what appeared to be a small table set for two. The whole scene was so perfectly romantic that she wondered if she had somehow stepped into someone else's life. "You've turned this into our own private winter retreat," she said in amazement as William helped her down from the sleigh. "I wanted to create a space where we could just be ourselves," he replied, leading her toward the pavilion. "No staff hovering, no schedules to keep, no protocols to follow. Just a husband and wife spending time together on a beautiful December morning." As they approached the pavilion, Catherine could see that every detail had been carefully planned. The interior was warm and cozy, with comfortable chairs positioned to take advantage of the view over the frozen pond. A small fire crackled in a portable fireplace, and fresh flowers adorned the table despite the winter season. It was elegant but informal, luxurious but intimate. "This must have taken enormous planning," Catherine said as they stepped inside. "How did you coordinate all of this without anyone in the household knowing?" William helped her out of her coat, hanging it carefully on a hook by the door. "Actually, several people knew. I just swore them to secrecy and appealed to their romantic sides. It's amazing what people will do when you explain that you're trying to surprise your wife." Catherine settled into one of the comfortable chairs, accepting a cup of perfectly prepared tea from a thermos William had somehow produced. The pavilion was wonderfully warm, and she could feel the tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying beginning to leave her shoulders. "This is wonderful, but I have to ask," she said, studying her husband's face, "what prompted all of this? Not that I'm complaining, but you've never gone to such elaborate lengths for a surprise before." William was quiet for a moment, looking out at the snow-covered landscape beyond the pavilion windows. When he spoke, his voice was more serious than she had expected. "Do you remember our third date?" he asked. "When I took you to that little cottage in the Scottish Highlands?" Catherine smiled at the memory. "Of course. We got completely lost trying to find it, the car broke down, and we ended up walking 3 miles in the rain. By the time we arrived, we were both soaked and covered in mud." "But you didn't complain," William said, turning back to look at her. "You just laughed and said it was the most fun you'd had in months. You helped me build a fire while our clothes dried, and we spent the evening talking about everything and nothing. No pretense, no pressure, just two people getting to know each other." "It was perfect," Catherine agreed softly. "One of my favorite memories from when we were dating." "That's what I've been thinking about lately," William said. "How simple and genuine everything was then. We could spend hours just talking, could make spontaneous decisions, could be completely ourselves without worrying about how it would look in the newspapers or what protocol demanded." Catherine felt her heart tighten as she understood what he was saying. "You miss those days too?" "I do," he admitted. "Don't get me wrong, I love our life. I love our children, I'm passionate about our work, and I'm grateful for the platform we have to make a difference. But sometimes I feel like we've lost something important in all the structure and formality." Catherine reached across the small space between their chairs and took his hand. "We've been so focused on being the perfect royal couple that we've forgotten how to be William and Catherine." "Exactly," he said, squeezing her fingers gently. "And I realized that if I didn't do something about it, we might wake up one day and find that we'd become strangers who happen to share a title and a household." The honesty of his words touched something deep in Catherine's heart. She had been feeling the same way but hadn't known how to express it without sounding ungrateful for their extraordinary life. Hearing William voice her own concerns made her feel less alone. "So you decided to recreate that feeling of spontaneity and intimacy," she said. "I decided to remind us both what it feels like to surprise each other, to break the rules a little, to prioritize our relationship over our responsibilities, at least for one day." William stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the winter landscape. "I've been planning this for weeks, but I wanted it to feel spontaneous, to capture that sense of adventure we used to share." Catherine joined him at the window, slipping her arm through his. "It's working. I can't remember the last time I felt this relaxed, this present in the moment." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the snow continue to fall gently outside. Catherine could feel William's contentment, and she realized how rare it was for both of them to be completely relaxed at the same time. Usually, when one of them had a break from official duties, the other was preparing for the next engagement or dealing with some aspect of their public responsibilities. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked eventually. "I can tell you have something else planned." William grinned, the boyish expression that had first captured her attention all those years ago at university. "What makes you so certain?" "Because this is lovely, but it's not the kind of surprise that would require you to look quite so pleased with yourself. You're practically vibrating with excitement about something." "You know me too well," William said, checking his watch. "And you're absolutely right. This morning has been about rediscovering the simple pleasure of each other's company, but this afternoon is about something else entirely." "Should I be worried?" Catherine asked with a laugh. "You should be prepared to be amazed," William replied. "But first, we have lunch." As if on cue, Catherine heard the sound of approaching footsteps on the snowy path. Through the window, she could see a figure approaching with what appeared to be a large basket. "Please tell me you haven't arranged for a 5-course meal to be served in a pavilion in the middle of nowhere," Catherine said, though she was smiling as she said it. "Nothing so formal," William assured her. "I thought we might enjoy something a bit more rustic." The person approaching turned out to be Mrs. Henderson, the castle's head cook, bundled up in a warm coat and carrying an enormous picnic basket. Catherine watched in amazement as the older woman set up what was clearly a gourmet picnic, complete with crusty bread, local cheeses, winter vegetables, and what smelled like Mrs. Henderson's famous beef stew. "Your Highness," Mrs. Henderson said to Catherine with a warm smile, "His Royal Highness thought you might enjoy a proper country lunch. Nothing too fancy, just good food to warm you up on a cold day." "Mrs. Henderson, this looks absolutely wonderful," Catherine replied, genuinely touched by the effort that had gone into the meal. "But shouldn't you be preparing Christmas dinner plans for the family gathering?" The older woman's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Oh, I am, Your Highness." But when Prince William explained what he was planning, well, let's just say that some of us old romantics were more than happy to help with a bit of surprise planning. After Mrs. Henderson had left them with promises that someone would return later to collect the dishes, William and Catherine settled down to their impromptu picnic. The food was delicious, hearty and warming, exactly the kind of meal that felt perfect for a snowy December day. "This stew is incredible," Catherine said, savoring another spoonful. "Mrs. Henderson has outdone herself." "She was delighted to be part of the conspiracy," William replied. "I think half the staff has been living vicariously through our surprise planning. Apparently, there haven't been nearly enough romantic gestures around the castle lately." Catherine laughed. "We'll have to remedy that. Though I have to say, you've set the bar rather high with today's efforts." "Today isn't over yet," William reminded her. "In fact, the most important part is still to come." "You keep saying that, but you're being very mysterious about what exactly is planned." William reached across the table and took her hand. "Do you trust me?" "Completely," Catherine replied without hesitation. "Then, trust me when I say that what's coming next is something I've been wanting to do for months, something that will hopefully show you just how much our relationship means to me." Catherine felt a flutter of anticipation in her chest. Whatever William had planned was clearly important to him, and his excitement was becoming contagious. "Will you at least give me a hint?" "I will tell you this much," William said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. This afternoon is about giving you something that I know you've been missing, something that I should have thought to provide a long time ago." "Now you're just being cryptic," Catherine protested, but she was smiling. "Patience, my dear wife. All will be revealed in due time." They finished their lunch in companionable conversation, talking about everything from the children's Christmas wishes to plans for the new year. Catherine found herself marveling at how easy it was to simply talk with William when they weren't surrounded by the usual distractions of their official life. This was what she had missed most, the ability to have long, meandering conversations without constantly checking the time or worrying about the next appointment. As they were finishing the last of Mrs. Henderson's apple tart, William's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it quickly, and his face lit up with satisfaction. "Perfect timing," he said, standing up and offering Catherine his hand. "Are you ready for the next part of our adventure?" Catherine accepted his hand and allowed him to pull her to her feet. "I suppose I don't have much choice, do I?" "You could always insist on returning to your cancelled appointments," William teased. "And miss finding out what has you looking like a schoolboy with a secret?" "Absolutely not." They left the pavilion and walked back toward the sleigh, but, instead of climbing in, William led her past it toward a path she hadn't noticed before. The path wound through a grove of trees that had been decorated with subtle white lights, creating a magical tunnel of illumination despite the gray December afternoon. "William, this is like something from a fairy tale," Catherine said, her voice filled with wonder. "You've transformed the entire landscape." "Wait until you see where we're going," he replied, practically bouncing with excitement. They walked hand in hand through the illuminated grove, their footsteps muffled by the snow. Catherine felt as though she was being led into an enchanted world, far removed from the realities of royal duties and public scrutiny. The lights in the trees cast a soft, ethereal glow over everything, and the silence was broken only by the gentle sound of snow falling through the branches. After several minutes of walking, they emerged from the grove into a large clearing that took Catherine's breath away. In the center of the clearing stood a beautiful gazebo, larger and more elaborate than the morning's pavilion, decorated with evergreen garlands and more white lights. But it wasn't the gazebo itself that made Catherine gasp in amazement. Surrounding the gazebo, arranged in a perfect circle in the snow, were easels holding large photographs. Even from a distance, Catherine could see that each photograph showed a different scene, and, as they moved closer, she realized what they were: pictures of moments from their relationship, from their early days at university through their wedding and the birth of their children. "William," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "What is this?" "This," William said, his own voice filled with pride and nervousness, "is our story. Every picture represents a moment that was important to me, a time when I fell a little more in love with you or when I realized how lucky I was to have you in my life." Catherine moved slowly from easel to easel, studying each photograph with growing amazement. Some were official portraits, others were candid shots taken during private moments. There was the photo from their graduation day, both of them grinning widely despite the pouring rain. Their engagement announcement picture, with Catherine's ring catching the light and both of them looking slightly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were undertaking. Wedding photos that captured not just the grandeur of the ceremony but the intimate moments of joy they had shared. Pictures of Catherine with each of their babies, her face radiant with maternal love. "Where did you get all of these?" she asked, stopping in front of a picture she had never seen before, herself and William during their early dating days, sitting on a blanket in a field, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. "Some are from official photographers, others from our personal collection, and a few I had to track down from friends who happened to have cameras at the right moments," William explained, moving to stand beside her. "That one was taken by Harry during one of our countryside weekends. I didn't even know he had captured it until I started collecting photos for this project." Catherine felt tears beginning to gather in her eyes as she continued moving around the circle. Each photograph told a story, and, together they created a visual narrative of their life together that was both beautiful and deeply personal. "This must have taken months to put together," she said, pausing in front of a recent photo of their family building sandcastles during their summer holiday. 3 months of secret planning," William confirmed. "The hardest part was getting copies of some of the personal photos without you noticing. I had to enlist the children's help for a few of them." "The children knew about this?" They were very excited to be part of the conspiracy. George in particular took his role as secret keeper very seriously. "I think he's been dying to tell you about it for weeks." Catherine completed the circle of photographs and turned to face William, who was watching her reaction with an expression of nervous anticipation. "This is the most thoughtful, most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me," she said softly. "But why? What prompted you to create something so elaborate and personal?" William took her hands in his expression serious despite the magical setting surrounding them. "Because I realized that in all the chaos of our public life, we don't take enough time to acknowledge our private story. We're so busy being symbols and representatives and examples that we sometimes forget to celebrate the actual relationship that makes all of that meaningful." "But surely this isn't the end of your surprise," Catherine said, studying his face. "There's something else, isn't there?" William's nervous expression shifted into a smile of pure joy. "Actually, there is one more thing. Something that I hope will be the most important part of this entire day." Before Catherine could ask what he meant, she heard the sound of voices approaching through the grove they had just walked through. Her heart jumped with panic, thinking that their private afternoon was about to be interrupted by staff or, worse, photographers who had somehow learned about William's secret planning. But, as the voices grew closer, Catherine realized she recognized them. Emerging from the grove were her parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, followed by her sister Pippa and brother James. They were all bundled up in warm coats and scarves, their faces bright with excitement and the cold air. "Surprise!" Pippa called out as they approached the gazebo. "Though I have to say, William's timing is perfect. We were starting to wonder if we were going to freeze to death waiting for our cue." Catherine looked at William in complete amazement. "You arranged for my family to be here?" "I thought you might like to share this moment with the people who knew you before you became a duchess," William replied. "The ones who love you for exactly who you are, not what you represent." Catherine felt the tears she had been holding back finally spill over as she was enveloped in hugs from her family. Her mother's embrace was warm and familiar, smelling of the perfume she had worn for as long as Catherine could remember. Pippa's hug came with whispered congratulations on having such a thoughtful husband, and James simply picked her up and spun her around as he had when they were children. "We've been hiding in the village inn for the past 2 hours," her father explained, his eyes twinkling with amusement. William's coordination of this entire operation would impress a military strategist. "I can't believe you managed to keep this secret from me," Catherine said to her mother. "You're terrible at keeping surprises." "This one was too important to ruin," Carol replied, reaching up to wipe a tear from her daughter's cheek. "William wanted today to be perfect for you, and we were honored to be included." Catherine turned back to William, who was watching the reunion with obvious satisfaction. "But why? What is all of this leading to?" William stepped forward and took her hands again, and Catherine could see that despite his joy, he was nervous about whatever came next. "Because," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the crisp air, "I wanted to recreate the feeling of the day I proposed to you, but this time with all the people we love present to witness it." Catherine's heart stopped. "William, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want to renew our vows," William said, his voice gaining strength and certainty. "Not as a publicity stunt or a royal tradition, but as a private celebration of everything we've built together and everything we want to create in the future. I want to stand in front of the people who matter most to us and promise again to love you, not as the Duchess of Cambridge, but as Catherine, the woman who has made every day of my life better simply by being in it." The clearing fell completely silent except for the gentle sound of snow falling through the evergreen branches. Catherine stared at William, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what he was proposing. A vow renewal ceremony, here in this magical setting, with only their closest family present. No state occasion, no international coverage, no protocols or politicians or diplomatic considerations. Just them, their love, and the people who had supported them from the beginning. "You want to renew our vows," she whispered. "I want to marry you again," William said simply. "The way we should have been able to the first time, with only love and joy and hope for the future. No pageantry, no pressure, no world watching. Just us, choosing each other again, in front of the people who knew us before we became symbols." Catherine felt as though her heart might burst from the sheer overwhelming beauty of what William was offering her. After years of living their love story in the public eye, he was giving her the chance to reclaim it as something private and personal and entirely their own. "Yes," she said, her voice barely audible through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." The moment Catherine said yes, the clearing erupted in cheers and applause from her family. William's face lit up with such pure joy that Catherine felt her heart swell with overwhelming love for this man who had managed to surprise her completely after all their years together. "But how?" she asked, still trying to process the magnitude of what he had arranged. "How did you organize a vow renewal ceremony without me having any idea?" "Very carefully," William replied with a grin. "And with help from some very dedicated co-conspirators." As if summoned by his words, more figures began emerging from the grove. Catherine gasped as she saw Harry approaching, followed by William's father, King Charles, and his stepmother, Queen Camilla. Behind them came a small group of their closest friends from university days, people Catherine hadn't seen in months due to their busy schedules. The guest list had to be small, William explained as Catherine was enveloped in more hugs and congratulations. "Both for practical reasons and because I wanted this to feel intimate, not like a state occasion." Catherine felt dizzy with emotion as she greeted each arrival. There was her university roommate Sarah, who had flown in from Scotland for the ceremony. Tom and Laura, who had introduced Catherine and William at their first university party. Even Mrs. Henderson appeared, no longer in her cook's uniform but dressed in a lovely winter coat, her face beaming with pride at being included in such a special moment. "The children," Catherine said suddenly, looking around. "Where are George, Charlotte, and Louis?" "Getting dressed," William replied mysteriously. "They have very important roles to play in this ceremony." Before Catherine could ask what roles, she noticed another figure approaching from a different path, a man in clerical robes whom she recognized as the Archbishop of Canterbury, though he was dressed far more casually than she had ever seen him, wearing a warm wool coat over his ceremonial vestments. "Your Grace," Catherine said, moving to greet him. "I can't believe William managed to convince you to participate in this impromptu ceremony." The Archbishop smiled warmly. "When the future king calls and explains that he wants to renew his wedding vows as a Christmas gift to his wife, with only family and friends present, it's not a request that one refuses. Besides," he added with a twinkle in his eye, "I've always believed that love should be celebrated whenever possible." Catherine turned back to William, still struggling to believe that all of this was really happening. "You thought of everything, didn't you?" "I tried to," William admitted. "Though I have to confess, there were moments when I wasn't sure I could pull it off. Coordinating everyone's schedules without you noticing required some creative storytelling." "Is that why you've been so secretive lately? All those mysterious phone calls and sudden meetings?" "Guilty as charged. I've been planning this for 3 months, and there were times when I thought you were going to figure it out. Especially last week when you caught me on the phone with your mother." Catherine laughed, remembering the incident. "You said you were discussing Christmas dinner arrangements." "Which was technically true," Carol interjected. "We were discussing arrangements, just not the kind William let you think." As the group gathered around them, Catherine felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the winter coats or the subtle outdoor heaters that had been discreetly positioned around the clearing. She was surrounded by love in its purest form, people who cared about her and William not because of their titles or public roles, but because of who they were as individuals and as a couple. "But where exactly are we going to have this ceremony?" Catherine asked, looking around the beautiful but distinctly outdoor setting. "Not that I'm complaining about the location, but it is December, and some of our guests aren't exactly dressed for an extended outdoor winter wedding." William's grin widened. "I'm so glad you asked. If you'll follow me, I have one more surprise to show you." He led the group toward the gazebo, and, as they got closer, Catherine realized it was larger and more elaborate than she had initially thought. What she had taken for a simple garden structure was actually a substantial pavilion, with solid walls and large windows that had been partially concealed by the evergreen decorations. "William," she breathed as they approached the entrance, "this isn't just a gazebo." "No, it's not," he agreed, opening what appeared to be a simple wooden door to reveal something that made Catherine gasp in amazement. Inside was a fully appointed chapel, complete with wooden pews, an altar, and stained glass windows that cast colorful patterns across the snow-white interior. The space was warm and inviting, lit by dozens of candles and decorated with winter flowers and evergreen garlands. "You built a chapel," Catherine said in wonder, stepping inside and turning slowly to take in every detail. "You actually constructed a temporary chapel in the woods." "It's not permanent," William explained, following her inside. "The whole structure can be dismantled after today." "But I wanted our ceremony to feel sacred and special, not just like an outdoor gathering. This is our private sanctuary, just for today." The chapel was perfect in its simplicity. The pews were made of warm wood that matched the rustic elegance of the setting, and each was decorated with small bouquets of winter roses and holly. At the front, the altar was draped in white linen and decorated with tall candles that cast a golden glow over everything. But what caught Catherine's attention most were the windows. They weren't traditional stained glass but rather beautiful panels that showed scenes from their relationship, similar to the photographs outside but rendered in brilliant colored glass. "The windows," Catherine said, moving closer to examine them. "Are those our moments?" "Commissioned from a local artist who specializes in contemporary stained glass," William confirmed. "Each panel represents a different stage of our relationship, from our meeting at university through the present day." Catherine studied each window in turn, marveling at how the artist had captured not just the events but the emotions of their journey together. There was their graduation day, rendered in blues and golds that somehow conveyed both the pride and uncertainty they had felt. Their engagement, shown in warm reds and pinks that radiated joy and love. The birth of each of their children, depicted in soft pastels that perfectly captured the tenderness of those moments. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Catherine said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "But, William, the expense, the coordination, the sheer logistics of creating all of this were completely worth it to see the look on your face right now," William interrupted gently. "Catherine, you've given up so much to be part of this family, to support me and the monarchy. You've adapted to protocols and schedules and public scrutiny with grace and dignity, but I know it hasn't always been easy. I wanted to give you something that was just ours, something that celebrated our love without any consideration for public opinion or royal tradition." Catherine felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she understood the full scope of what William had done. This wasn't just about renewing their vows, it was about reclaiming their relationship as something that existed independent of their public roles. He had created a space and a moment where they could be just William and Catherine, two people who loved each other and wanted to celebrate that love with the people who mattered most to them. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "You deserve this and so much more," William replied, taking her hands in his. "You deserve to be loved and celebrated and surprised. You deserve to have your happiness prioritized over protocol, at least sometimes. And you deserve to know that no matter how complicated our public life becomes, our private love is the most important thing in my world." Before Catherine could respond, the chapel door opened and their children appeared, led by Pippa and looking absolutely adorable in coordinated winter outfits. George wore a small suit with a winter coat, Charlotte was dressed in a beautiful velvet dress with a warm cape, and little Louis toddled behind them in an outfit that made him look like a tiny winter prince. "Mummy!" Charlotte exclaimed, running toward Catherine. "Did you see our surprise? Daddy said we got to have a pretend wedding." Catherine knelt down to embrace her daughter, laughing through her tears. "It's not pretend, sweetheart. Daddy and I are going to renew our wedding vows, which means we're going to promise each other again that we'll always love each other and take care of each other." "Like a real wedding but with the same people?" George asked, his logical mind trying to process the concept. "Exactly like that," William confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. "And you three have very important jobs in this ceremony." "What jobs?" Louis asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "You'll see," William said mysteriously. "But first, Mummy needs to get ready." Catherine looked down at her casual clothes, suddenly realizing that while the setting was perfect and the sentiment was beautiful, she was hardly dressed for a wedding ceremony, even an informal one. "William, I can't renew our vows dressed in jeans and a jumper," she protested. "I look like I've been tramping through the snow all day," which I suppose I have. Already taken care of, Pippa announced, producing a garment bag that Catherine hadn't noticed before. I've been hiding this in the village and along with Mum and Dad. William was very specific about what he wanted you to wear. Catherine accepted the garment bag with trembling hands, curious and nervous about what William had chosen. Should I be worried about your fashion sense? She asked him. Trust me, William replied. I had expert consultation. Catherine unzipped the bag and gasped at what she found inside. It was a dress she had never seen before, but it was absolutely perfect, a cream-colored wool dress with long sleeves and a full skirt, elegant but warm enough for a winter ceremony. The fabric was soft and luxurious, and the cut was flattering without being too formal. With it was a matching coat and a beautiful fur-lined cape that looked both practical and regal. William, this is gorgeous, Catherine said, holding the dress up to examine it more closely. Where did you find it? I had it made, he replied simply. I described to the designer what I wanted, something that would be perfect for a winter vow renewal ceremony, elegant but not too formal, beautiful but practical. Something that looked like you. Catherine felt overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of every detail. William hadn't just planned a ceremony, he had thought about every aspect of the experience, from her comfort to her appearance to the emotional impact of each element. There's a small room behind the altar where you can change, Pippa said, taking Catherine's arm. Mum and I will help you get ready. But, the ceremony, Catherine protested. Everyone is waiting. Everyone is perfectly happy to wait, William assured her. This is our day, on our timeline. There's no schedule to keep except the one we choose. As Pippa led Catherine toward the small changing room, Catherine's mother squeezed her hand. Darling, I need you to know how proud your father and I are, not just of who you've become as a duchess, but of how you've handled everything that comes with this life. And we're especially proud that you found a man who loves you enough to create something this special for you. Catherine hugged her mother tightly, feeling the comfort of unconditional love that had sustained her through all the challenges of royal life. I still can't believe he managed to arrange all of this without me suspecting anything. He was very determined, Carol replied with a smile. And very nervous. I think he wanted this to be perfect because he knows how much you've sacrificed to support him and his role. The changing room was small but comfortable, with a mirror, good lighting, and everything Catherine needed to prepare for the ceremony. As Pippa helped her out of her casual clothes and into the beautiful dress, Catherine felt a transformation taking place that went beyond simply changing outfits. The dress fit perfectly, as though it had been made specifically for her measurements, which she supposed it had been. The fabric was incredibly soft against her skin, and the cut was both flattering and comfortable. When she looked in the mirror, she saw not the Duchess of Cambridge in her official capacity, but simply a woman preparing to marry the man she loved. You look absolutely radiant, Pippa said, fastening the small buttons at the back of the dress. William chose well. I can't believe this is really happening, Catherine said, staring at her reflection. This morning I was worried about cancelled appointments and Christmas card approvals, and now I'm preparing to renew my wedding vows in a chapel my husband built in secret. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, Carol said, beginning to arrange Catherine's hair into a simple but elegant style. The best surprises are the ones that remind us what's truly important. As her mother worked on her hair, Catherine found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. All the challenges of adapting to royal life, all the times she had felt overwhelmed by the protocols and expectations, all the moments when she had wondered if she was strong enough for the role she had taken on. And, through it all, William had been there, supporting her, understanding her struggles, and now showing her in the most beautiful way possible that their love remained at the center of everything. There, Carol said, stepping back to admire her work. Perfect. Catherine looked in the mirror again and smiled at what she saw. Her hair was arranged in loose waves that looked elegant but natural, and the dress transformed her from a woman who had been tramping through the snow into someone ready for the most important ceremony of her life. The children are going to be so excited to see you, Pippa said, helping Catherine into the matching coat. They've been practicing their parts all week. They've known about this for a week? Catherine asked in amazement. George has known for 3 weeks, actually. William said he needed time to prepare for his role as ring bearer. Charlotte found out 2 weeks ago when William needed her help choosing flowers, and Louis learned yesterday because, well, he's 3 and would have probably blurted out the secret if he'd known any longer. Catherine laughed, imagining her children struggling to keep such an enormous secret. No wonder George has been acting so mysterious lately. I thought he was planning something for Christmas. He was, Pippa replied with a grin. This. As they prepared to leave the small changing room, Catherine felt a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. In just a few minutes, she would be walking down the aisle of a chapel that her husband had created specifically for this moment, surrounded by the people who loved her most, to renew vows that meant even more to her now than they had on their original wedding day. Are you ready? Carol asked, offering Catherine her arm. Catherine took one last look in the mirror, then turned toward the door with a smile of pure joy. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. When Catherine emerged from the changing room, the chapel had been transformed once again. Soft music was playing from hidden speakers, and everyone had taken their seats in the wooden pews. The candlelight flickered warmly against the stained glass windows, creating an atmosphere that was both sacred and intimate. But what took Catherine's breath away was the sight of William waiting for her at the altar. He had changed out of his casual clothes into a dark suit that she recognized as the one he had worn for their engagement photos, and his face was radiant with joy and anticipation. Standing beside him were their 3 children, each holding something that made Catherine's heart skip a beat. George, looking very serious about his important responsibility, held a small velvet cushion with their original wedding rings resting on top. Charlotte had a small basket filled with white rose petals, which she was clearly dying to scatter down the aisle. And little Louis, beaming with pride, clutched a tiny bouquet that was an exact miniature of Catherine's original bridal bouquet. "Oh my goodness," Catherine whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You recreated every detail." Her father appeared beside her, offering his arm with the same gentle smile he had worn on their original wedding day. "Shall we do this again, my dear?" he asked softly. Catherine took his arm, feeling the familiar comfort of his steady presence. "Yes, let's do this again." As they began walking down the aisle, Catherine felt as though she was experiencing a dream. The chapel was small enough that the walk was intimate rather than formal, but every step felt meaningful. The faces of their loved ones reflected pure joy and love, and she could see tears in many eyes as they watched this private celebration of enduring love. Charlotte began scattering rose petals as Catherine passed, her concentration intense as she tried to distribute them evenly. Louis held up his tiny bouquet with obvious pride, and George walked with the careful dignity of someone who understood the importance of his role. Catherine felt her heart swell with love for her children, who had somehow managed to keep this enormous secret while preparing to play such important parts in the ceremony. When she reached the altar, William stepped forward to take her hand from her father, and Catherine felt the same electric connection she had experienced on their original wedding day. But, this time, there was an added depth to the feeling, a richness that came from years of shared experiences, challenges overcome together, and love that had deepened rather than diminished with time. "You look absolutely beautiful," William whispered as they turned to face each other. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Catherine replied softly, unable to stop smiling. The Archbishop stepped forward, his face warm with genuine pleasure. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice carrying easily in the intimate space, "we are gathered here today not to witness the beginning of a love story, but to celebrate the continuing chapters of one that has already brought joy to millions and blessed the world with its example of commitment, partnership, and enduring affection." Catherine felt tears beginning to gather in her eyes as the familiar words took on new meaning in this setting. Their original wedding had been a magnificent state occasion, but this ceremony felt more personal, more focused on the actual promises they were making to each other. "William and Catherine," the Archbishop continued, "you have lived as husband and wife for 13 years. You have weathered the storms that come to all marriages, but you have also experienced joys that few couples are blessed to share. Today, you have chosen to renew the vows you made to each other, not because they have been broken or forgotten, but because your love has grown and deepened, and you wish to acknowledge the people you have become together." Catherine looked into William's eyes and saw her own emotions reflected there, overwhelming love, gratitude for the journey they had shared, and excitement for the future that lay ahead of them. She thought about all the moments that had brought them to this point, from their early days of dating to the challenges of royal life, from the joy of becoming parents to the satisfaction of working together on causes they both cared about. "I understand," the Archbishop said with a gentle smile, "that you have written your own vows for this renewal ceremony. William, would you like to begin?" William nodded, taking Catherine's hands in his and looking directly into her eyes. For a moment, he seemed overcome with emotion, and Catherine could see him gathering his thoughts before he began to speak. "Catherine," he said, his voice strong and clear, 13 years ago, I promised to love, honor, and cherish you for all the days of my life. Today, I want to renew that promise, but with the wisdom that comes from having lived it for over a decade." Catherine felt her breath catch as William continued, his words clearly coming from the deepest part of his heart. "You have been far more than a wife to me. You have been my partner in every sense of the word, my closest friend, my most trusted advisor, and the strongest person I know. You have taken on responsibilities that you never asked for with grace and dignity that amazes me every day. You have made me a better man, a better prince, and a better father." Catherine could hear soft murmurs of appreciation from their gathered loved ones, but her attention was completely focused on William's words and the love she saw in his eyes. "I promise you that for all the days remaining to us, I will strive to be worthy of the love you have given me so freely. I will support your dreams as you have supported mine. I will protect your happiness as fiercely as you have protected our family. And I will never stop being grateful for the miracle of having you as my partner in this extraordinary life we have built together." William paused, his voice thick with emotion before continuing, "I also promise that I will never again let so much time pass without reminding you how much you mean to me, not just as the Duchess of Cambridge, but as Catherine, the woman who still makes my heart race when she smiles at me across a crowded room." Catherine was crying openly now, touched beyond words by the honesty and depth of William's vows. When the Archbishop nodded to indicate it was her turn, she took a moment to compose herself before beginning to speak. "William," she said, her voice soft but steady, "when I married you 13 years ago, I thought I was promising to love a prince. What I discovered was that I was promising to love a man whose kindness, dedication, and sense of duty inspire me every day." She paused, looking around at their children and their family members before returning her gaze to William's face. "This life we have chosen together hasn't always been easy. There have been times when the weight of expectations felt overwhelming, when the scrutiny felt unbearable, when I wondered if I was strong enough for the role I had taken on. But you have never let me face those challenges alone. You have been my anchor when the storms felt too strong, and my biggest cheerleader when I needed confidence." Catherine's voice grew stronger as she continued, "You have given me 3 beautiful children who are the light of my life, and you have shown them what it means to be a loving, present father even while carrying the responsibilities of your position. You have supported my work with charities and causes I care about, and you have made me feel like an equal partner in everything we do together." She squeezed his hands gently before delivering her final promises. "Today, I renew my promise to love and support you, not just as your wife, but as your partner in the work we do together. I promise to continue growing alongside you, to face whatever challenges come our way as a team, and to never lose sight of the love that brought us together in the first place. And I promise that no matter how public our life becomes, I will always protect the private space where we are just William and Catherine, just a man and woman who found each other and chose to build a life together." When Catherine finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. Even the children seemed to understand that they were witnessing something special, something that went beyond the formal ceremonies they were accustomed to attending. The Archbishop nodded with approval before continuing with the ceremony. "The rings you exchanged on your wedding day have been worn every day since as symbols of your commitment to each other. George, would you bring the rings forward?" George stepped forward with his cushion, his young face serious with concentration as he carefully carried the rings that had symbolized his parents' love for his entire life. Catherine noticed that the rings had been polished until they gleamed, but they showed the gentle wear that came from years of daily wearing, small marks that told the story of all the hands they had held, all the work they had done, all the moments they had witnessed. "These rings," the Archbishop said, taking them gently from the cushion, "have been blessed by years of faithful wearing. They have been present for every joy and every challenge you have faced together. As you place them once again on each other's fingers, let them serve as reminders not just of the promises you made today, but of all the promises you have kept along the way. William took Catherine's ring and held it at the tip of her finger, looking into her eyes as he spoke. With this ring, I thee wed, again and always, for all the days of our lives. As he slipped the familiar band back onto her finger, Catherine felt a rush of emotion that was somehow even more powerful than what she had experienced during their original ceremony. This wasn't just about making promises for the future, it was about acknowledging everything they had already built together and choosing to continue building it. Catherine took William's ring and repeated the gesture, her voice strong and clear. With this ring, I thee wed, again and always, for all the days of our lives. When both rings were back in place, the Archbishop raised his hands in blessing. By the power vested in me, and in the presence of these loving witnesses, I declare that William and Catherine have renewed their marriage covenant and strengthened the bonds that unite them. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. The chapel erupted in applause and cheers from their small congregation, but Catherine barely heard it. She was completely focused on William's face as he leaned down to kiss her, a kiss that felt both familiar and completely new, full of promise and gratitude and overwhelming love. When they finally broke apart, Charlotte could contain herself no longer. "Can I throw the rest of the flowers now?" she asked loudly, making everyone in the chapel burst into laughter. "Throw away, sweetheart," Catherine said, still laughing as Charlotte began enthusiastically scattering the remaining rose petals over everyone within reach. As their family and friends surrounded them with congratulations and hugs, Catherine felt a sense of completion that she hadn't even realized she had been missing. This ceremony had given her something she hadn't known she needed, the chance to choose William again, consciously and deliberately, with full knowledge of what their life together really meant. "How do you feel, Mrs. Windsor?" William asked softly, using the casual version of her name that only he was allowed to use. "Like the luckiest woman in the world," Catherine replied honestly. "And like I'm married to the most thoughtful, romantic, wonderful man who ever lived." "Good answer," William said with a grin. "Because this day isn't over yet." Catherine looked at him with mock suspicion. "Please tell me there isn't more." "I don't think my emotions can handle any more surprises today." "Just one more thing," William promised. "Something I think you'll enjoy." Before Catherine could ask what he meant, she heard the sound of more voices approaching from outside the chapel. Through the windows, she could see a larger group of people walking through the grove, and her heart jumped as she realized who they were. "William," she said slowly, "please tell me you haven't arranged for more surprise guests." "Not guests exactly," William replied, looking pleased with himself. "More like an audience." As the chapel door opened, Catherine gasped to see members of the castle staff filing in, people who had become like extended family during their years at Windsor. There was Mrs. Henderson beaming with pride, the head groundskeeper who had helped create the magical setting outside, the security team who had somehow managed to coordinate this entire event without Catherine noticing, and dozens of others who had played roles in making this day possible. "You wanted everyone who helped make today happen to see the result," Catherine said, understanding immediately. "These people have watched us grow as a couple, have supported us through challenges, have helped raise our children, and have kept this secret for months," William explained. "I wanted them to be part of the celebration, to see that their efforts created something truly magical." Catherine felt overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of including the staff who had become so important to their daily lives. These were the people who saw them at their most human, who helped them balance their public roles with their private family life, who had invested in their happiness in countless small ways over the years. "Thank you," she said to the assembled group, her voice carrying clearly in the chapel. "Thank you for helping William create this perfect day, and thank you for all the ways you support our family every day. We couldn't do any of this without you." The response was warm applause and more than a few emotional faces among the staff members, many of whom had worked for the royal family for decades and had never been included in such a personal moment. As the celebration continued, with informal conversations and shared laughter filling the chapel, Catherine found herself marveling at how William had managed to create something that felt both grand and intimate, special and accessible, traditional and completely personal. He had somehow honored every relationship that mattered to them while keeping the focus on what was most important, their love for each other and their commitment to their shared future. I have just one question, Catherine said to William as they stood together watching their children play with the staff members' children who had been brought along for the celebration. What's that? How on earth am I supposed to surprise you for your birthday after this? You've set the bar impossibly high. William laughed, pulling her closer to his side. You don't need to surprise me, Catherine. You surprise me every day just by being exactly who you are. That's very sweet, Catherine replied, but not very helpful for birthday planning. Then, how about this, William said, his voice taking on the playful tone she loved. Just promise me that whatever you plan, we'll face it together. That's all the surprise I need. Catherine looked around the chapel one more time, taking in the scene of their loved ones celebrating their renewed commitment, their children playing happily among people who cared for them, and the warm glow of candlelight that made everything feel magical and perfect. That, she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss her husband again, is the easiest promise I've ever made. As the sun began to set over the winter landscape, casting long shadows across the snow-covered clearing, William had one final surprise for Catherine and their guests. The chapel had been wonderful for the ceremony, but he had planned something special for the celebration that followed. If everyone would follow me, William announced, I'd like to show you where we'll be having our reception. Catherine looked at him with amused exasperation. A reception too? William, at what point did this stop being a simple surprise and become a full-scale event? About 3 months ago when I realized that if I was going to do this, I wanted to do it properly, William replied with a grin. Besides, we can't send everyone home without feeding them. That would be terribly impolite. He led the group out of the chapel and along another path that Catherine hadn't noticed before. As they walked, small lights began to twinkle on in the trees around them, creating a magical canopy of illumination that guided their way through the winter evening. Motion sensors, William explained when Catherine gasped at the lights. The grounds crew has been working on this lighting system for weeks. It activates as we walk, so it feels like the forest is welcoming us. You've thought of absolutely everything, haven't you? Catherine said, shaking her head in amazement. I tried to, William admitted. Though I have to confess, there were several moments when I wasn't sure I could pull it all off. Especially when you started asking questions about why I was having so many mysterious meetings. They emerged into another clearing, larger than the one that housed the chapel, and Catherine stopped short at what she saw before her. A beautiful pavilion had been erected, large enough to accommodate their entire group but designed to feel intimate and warm. The structure was made of wood and glass, with a peaked roof and walls of windows that allowed the occupants to feel connected to the winter landscape while staying warm and comfortable inside. It's like a winter palace, Charlotte exclaimed, running ahead to press her nose against one of the large windows. That's exactly what I was hoping for, William said, opening the door and gesturing for everyone to enter. The interior of the pavilion took Catherine's breath away. Round tables had been set up throughout the space, each decorated with winter flowers and candles that cast a warm glow over everything. A small dance floor occupied one corner, with a string quartet already in place and ready to provide music. Along one wall, a magnificent buffet had been arranged, featuring all of Catherine's favorite foods alongside traditional British winter fare. But what caught Catherine's attention most was the wall of windows at the far end of the pavilion. They looked out over the frozen pond they had visited earlier in the day, but now the entire area had been transformed with thousands of tiny lights that reflected off the ice like fallen stars. The pond, Catherine breathed, moving toward the windows to get a better look. You've turned it into something from a fairy tale. I wanted to make sure you had a view that would remind you of this day every time you looked at it, William explained, coming to stand beside her. Even after all of this is taken down and life returns to normal, that pond will still be there, and you'll be able to remember today whenever you see it. Catherine felt tears gathering in her eyes again as she understood the full scope of what William had created. It wasn't just about one perfect day, it was about creating lasting memories that would enrich their daily lives for years to come. He had transformed a part of their home into something that would forever be connected to this renewal of their love. You're going to make me cry again, she warned, leaning against his shoulder. Happy tears, I hope, William replied, wrapping his arm around her. The happiest, Catherine confirmed. As their guests began to explore the pavilion and settle at the beautifully appointed tables, Catherine found herself surrounded by conversations and laughter that felt completely natural despite the elegant setting. Her parents were chatting with King Charles about the logistics of secret event planning, while Harry was entertaining the children with what appeared to be an impromptu magic show. The staff members who had been invited to join the celebration were mingling easily with family and friends, creating an atmosphere that felt warm and inclusive rather than formal and hierarchical. "This is exactly what I hoped for," William said, watching the interactions around them. "Everyone comfortable, no one standing on ceremony, just people who care about us celebrating together." "It's perfect," Catherine agreed. "But, I have to ask, how are you going to explain all of this to the official household? Surely someone is going to notice that you've constructed temporary buildings and rearranged half the Windsor grounds." William's expression became slightly sheepish. "Actually, I did clear this with my father before I started planning. I thought it was only fair to let him know that I was going to be making some temporary modifications to the estate." "And what did he say?" "He said it sounded like exactly the kind of romantic gesture my mother would have appreciated, and that he was honored to be included in something so meaningful to our family." Catherine felt her heart warm at the mention of Diana. William rarely spoke about his mother directly, but she knew that he often wondered what Diana would have thought about their life together, their children, their approach to their royal duties. To know that he felt his mother would have approved of this day made it even more special. Before she could respond, Mrs. Henderson approached with a large cake that made Catherine gasp in recognition. It was an exact replica of their original wedding cake, down to the smallest decorative detail, but sized appropriately for their intimate gathering. "Mrs. Henderson," Catherine said in amazement, "how did you manage to recreate this so perfectly?" "I may have kept the original recipe and design notes all these years," the cook replied with a proud smile. "A baker never forgets a royal wedding cake, especially one as special as yours was." William stepped forward to admire the cake, shaking his head in wonder. "Mrs. Henderson, you've outdone yourself. Catherine and I will never be able to thank you enough for everything you've done to make this day perfect." "Seeing the joy on both your faces is thanks enough," Mrs. Henderson replied warmly. "Now, shall we cut the cake and get this celebration properly started?" The cake cutting was accompanied by cheers and applause from their gathered loved ones, and Catherine found herself laughing as William insisted on feeding her the first bite just as he had done at their original wedding. Some traditions, she realized, were worth repeating. As the evening progressed, the pavilion filled with music and conversation and the kind of relaxed happiness that comes when people who truly care about each other are able to celebrate together without pretense or formality. Catherine found herself moving from group to group, talking with old friends she rarely had time to see, watching her children play with cousins and family friends, and marveling at how William had managed to create an atmosphere that felt both special and completely natural. "May I have this dance?" William asked, appearing at her elbow as the string quartet began playing a waltz. Catherine accepted his hand and allowed him to lead her onto the small dance floor, where they were soon joined by other couples. Dancing with William in this setting felt both familiar and new, like discovering a different dimension of something she thought she already knew completely. "So," Catherine said as they swayed together to the gentle music, "what happens tomorrow? Do we go back to cancelled appointments and Christmas card approvals and pretending this never happened?" "Tomorrow," William said, spinning her gently, "we go back to our regular lives. But we go back as people who have been reminded of what's most important to us. We go back knowing that underneath all the titles and responsibilities and protocols, we're still just two people who chose to love each other and build a life together. And the next time I'm feeling overwhelmed by royal protocol? The next time you're feeling overwhelmed by anything, I want you to remember today. I want you to remember that no matter how complicated our public life becomes, our private love is strong enough to handle it. And I want you to remember that I will always choose you over protocol, our family over formality, and our happiness over public expectations." Catherine felt tears threatening again at the sincerity in William's voice. "Promise me something," she said softly. "Anything. Promise me that we won't let so much time pass before we do something like this again. Not necessarily something this elaborate, but something that's just for us, something that reminds us who we are when no one else is watching." "I promise," William said solemnly. "In fact, I'm already thinking about what I might plan for your birthday." Catherine laughed, the sound carrying across the pavilion and making several of their guests turn to smile at them. "I was serious when I said you've set the bar impossibly high. How am I supposed to compete with secret chapel construction and surprise vow renewals?" "You don't need to compete," William replied. "You just need to keep being exactly who you are. That's the best gift you could possibly give me." As the waltz came to an end, they were interrupted by Charlotte tugging on Catherine's dress. "Mummy, Daddy, look outside. It's snowing again." Catherine turned toward the windows and gasped at the sight that greeted them. Large, fluffy snowflakes were falling steadily, catching the light from the pavilion and the thousands of tiny lights around the pond. The winter landscape looked even more magical than before, like something from the most beautiful Christmas card ever created. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect. Should we go out and enjoy it?" William suggested. "The children are clearly dying to play in the fresh snow." Within minutes, their entire group had bundled up in coats and scarves and moved outside to enjoy the falling snow. Catherine watched with delight as Louis immediately began trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue while Charlotte and George started building what they announced would be the world's largest snowman. Even the adults seemed to shed years as they began joining snowball fights and admiring the winter wonderland that surrounded them. "This is what I wanted most," William said, coming to stand beside Catherine as they watched their family and friends playing in the snow. "Not just the ceremony or the celebration, but this moment right here. Everyone we love, everyone who loves us, together and happy and completely themselves." Catherine slipped her hand into his, feeling the familiar comfort of their joined fingers. "You've given me the most beautiful day I could have imagined. But, more than that, you've reminded me why I fell in love with you in the first place." "Oh? And why was that?" "Because you see the world differently than anyone else I've ever met. You saw the possibility for magic in an ordinary December day. You saw the potential for joy in the midst of all our responsibilities and protocols. And you cared enough about my happiness to spend months creating something that would remind me what's truly important." William was quiet for a moment, watching their children playing in the snow with their cousins and friends. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful and warm. "I've been thinking a lot lately about the legacy we want to leave, both as members of the royal family and as parents. And I realized that the most important legacy isn't the charities we support or the official duties we fulfill, though those matter enormously. The most important legacy is showing our children, and everyone who watches our family, what real love looks like. What commitment means. What it means to choose each other again and again, even when it's not easy." Catherine felt her heart swell with pride and love for this man who understood so deeply what their life together meant, not just to them but to everyone who looked to their family as an example of how to navigate life's challenges with grace and love. "Today you've shown everyone here what real love looks like," she said. "You've shown them that even after 13 years of marriage, even with all the pressures and responsibilities we face, it's still possible to surprise each other, to prioritize each other, to choose romance and joy and spontaneity. We've shown them that together," William corrected gently. "Your willingness to trust me, to embrace the surprise, to find joy in the unexpected, that's what made today magical. I could have planned the most elaborate event in the world, but without your joy and love and presence, it would have been meaningless." They stood together in the falling snow, surrounded by the laughter of their loved ones, watching their children create memories that would last a lifetime. Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her, not just for this perfect day but for the entire journey that had brought them to this moment. "What are you thinking about?" William asked softly. "I'm thinking about how incredibly lucky we are," Catherine replied. "Lucky to have found each other, lucky to have these beautiful children, lucky to have work that matters and family that supports us. But, mostly, I'm thinking about how lucky I am to be married to a man who would spend 3 months planning a secret vow renewal ceremony just to see me smile." "You smile every day," William pointed out with a laugh. "I hardly needed to go to such elaborate lengths just to see that." "But the smile is different," Catherine said, turning to face him fully. "This is the smile of a woman who has been reminded that she is loved completely, cherished deeply, and chosen again and again by the man of her dreams. This is the smile of someone who knows that no matter what challenges tomorrow might bring, she has a partner who will always find a way to bring magic into their life together. William leaned down to kiss her, a soft, gentle kiss that tasted of snowflakes and promises and the kind of love that only grows stronger with time. When they broke apart, Catherine rested her forehead against his, feeling completely content for the first time in months. "Thank you," she whispered. "For all of this. For reminding me who we are underneath everything else. For showing me that our love story is still being written." "Thank you," William replied, "for saying yes to renewing our vows, for embracing the surprise, and for 13 years of making every day better just by being part of it." As the snow continued to fall around them and their loved ones continued to celebrate nearby, Catherine realized that this day would become one of her most treasured memories. Not just because of the elaborate planning or the beautiful setting, but because it represented everything that was best about their relationship: thoughtfulness, creativity, commitment, and a love that was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to bring joy to the other person. "So what happens now?" Catherine asked as they began walking back toward the pavilion, where their guests were gathering for hot chocolate and more celebration. "Now," William said, wrapping his arm around her waist, "we go inside and enjoy the rest of our party. Tomorrow we go back to being the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge with all the responsibilities that entails. But tonight, we're just William and Catherine, celebrating 13 years of marriage and looking forward to many more years of surprising each other." "I love the sound of that," Catherine replied, leaning into his embrace as they walked. "And, Catherine?" "Yes?" "Happy early Christmas, my love." Catherine laughed, the sound carrying across the winter air like music. "Happy early Christmas to you too, William. Though I have to say, this is going to be a very hard gift to top." "Who says we're done surprising each other?" William replied with the kind of mischievous grin that had first captured her attention all those years ago at university. As they rejoined their celebration, surrounded by family and friends and the magic of a perfect winter evening, Catherine knew that this day had given her something precious, the reminder that even in the most scrutinized life imaginable, love could still find a way to surprise, delight, and inspire. And that was the greatest Christmas gift she could have possibly received. The pavilion welcomed them back with warmth and light and the sound of people they loved celebrating the enduring power of choosing each other, again and again, for all the days of their lives. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their magical winter wonderland in pristine white, preserving the beauty of this perfect day in crystalline perfection. And, somewhere in the distance, the lights around the pond continued to twinkle like earthbound stars, a reminder that some kinds of magic are worth the effort it takes to create them, and that the very best surprises are the ones that come from the heart of someone who loves you enough to move mountains, build chapels, and create winter wonderlands, all for the simple joy of seeing you smile.